Hey, welcome back to IGN Live at E3. Shadow of Mordor was a breakout hit, and we all came to love the unique Nemesis system. Everything is bigger and better in the sequel, Shadow of War, and Brandon and Michael are here to tell us more. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Let's talk Shadow of War. First thing I want to know, all of the orc voices are back, right? That is the most important part to me.
All and many, many, many more.
Many,
the
many
scale
more.
Of the voices, the characters, we just...
Wet, angry frogmen running around going, it's my favorite noise.
Plenty of that.
If you're looking for more voices, I got some. Thank you for coming on. Tell me what is new in Shadow of War?
It's a big question. We've got I guess I'll break it down a little bit. In the Shadow of Mordor was our first game in this genre. It's our first open world, third-person action game. So of course we learned a huge amount. So we wanted to take the things that were good about the first game. The combat was strong. The Nemesis system and the orcs were great. This world and this universe and Mordor were great. So we just really doubled down on all of those things. Just expanded them massively, polished them. Within the combat, added an entire layer of progression and gear and player customization, new weapons, new skills. The Nemesis system, we expanded that massively to include not just these unique personal enemies, but also followers as well. So you've got whole new types of relationships, even friendships, betrayals, loyalty.
So now instead of just pissing people off, I can disappoint them too.
You can disappoint them and then dominate them and then piss them off again and then shame them and cast them out.
That sounds
and
amazing.
Then murder them and then have their best friend turning up wanting to avenge their murder and then do it all
disappoint
again.
their best friend, and then the cycle continues. Wow, that's awesome.
That was one of my favorite things about the first game. When Shadow of Mordor came out, that Nemesis system was such a huge system. And this time around, you've actually doubled down on the customization of orcs with these new tribes.
Yep.
So can you speak to a little bit about tribes and how they sort of react with the world and sort of react with the player as he goes through it?
Yeah, it's almost like in Shadow of Mordor we had one orc tribe, you know, we had this sort of...
The unified Sauron army,
Yes, and now we wanted to bring more of sort of society and culture and tribes and sort of the divisions of these orc cultures into Mordor. So the orcs belong to these different tribes, and then also the hierarchy of the orcs rises up high now. We have overlords who are actually in control of fortresses and entire regions. So whichever tribe the overlord belongs to, that changes the nature of the fortress, but it also spreads the influence out throughout the entire open world and the living world. So the chatter that you'll hear the orcs speaking to, the different outposts that you'll encounter and how they're decorated, some of the side missions that you'll encounter. If the feral tribe's in charge, there's going to be more hunting missions and so on. So
speaking of outposts, that's what we're seeing here, right?
Oh, yes. Actually, let me just see. Sorry, I was looking away a bit there. So as well as the fortresses, you're also trying to spread your control and take over the open world through the regions. And one of the ways you can do that is we have these outposts that are spread throughout the world. And if you go into those outposts, you can draw out the orc commander who's in charge of this outpost. So in this case, if Evan goes around and he's actually manages to stealth kill some of these orcs. Oh, we can see, sorry to cut in, but this is a feral tribe.
Oh, with the dragon there.
And that drake bait is there. So that's going to create a combat opportunity to actually bring the dragons, drakes, I should say, come flying in here.
And those are neutral, right? Those aren't part of the orc army. Those are just flying around Mordor, ready to eat anything, including you, and you can see one right there as well.
Yeah, they're not tamed. So basically, between the time of our game, which takes place before Lord of the Rings, and Lord of the Rings, when the Nazgul are forced to use the Fell Beast, I think it's because they were never able to successfully control the drakes here. They're just too...
I like that the dragons or the drakes are just like sort of a chaotic evil. They don't have their own robust political, intellectual system. They don't pick sides. They're just like, you burn one of us, we're killing you.
Yeah, we're just going to burn all of you. And of course, another thing that we've added is the fact of having a much more dynamic fire system. So the vegetation can catch fire, the barrels of the orc grog, if they break and the grog spreads out, that can ignite and go up in flames. And then the flame affects the combat as well.
You can show up to their house and burn their booze and kill their dogs.
Sorry. So here's
what was
a
that?
Graug there as well. That's another one of the big elements of wildlife we have in these different regions.
I was going to ask you about that. You had sort of like bees and these kind of nightmare wolf dog monster things in the last game, which I'm sure have a technical term for people who are really
they're called Caragor.
Yeah.
Okay. I like my version, but
Yeah,
we'll go
I
with
do
yours.
too.
It rolls off the tongue better for you guys. And what else can we see outside of that and what we've talked about so far today?
Oh, sorry, I always get in trouble when I talk over these guys.
We got to hear him out. Yeah, there he goes.
We're about to find out.
The personalities are so fantastic.
I know.
Yeah, so he's the trophy hunter. So he's... Oh,
Heard the alarm, not knowing what I would find. Seeing you, I can't believe
It's nice of him
my
to wear
good
some clothes.
fortune.
yeah. Well, I don't know if you can see the detail there, but that guy was the dwarf hater. So he had the little necklace there, and that was completely made of little ripped-off dwarf faces.
Yep.
He really hates dwarves.
Yeah, clearly.
And I know I'm jumping around a lot because there's often so much going on in this game, but
Yeah.
Well, that's the beauty of it, right? Like all
Yeah.
of this is generated totally randomly, procedurally. Right?
Yes.
Like these are not characters that are placed by you by hand, and
Wow.
anybody that plays this particular outpost during their run isn't going to find the dwarf hater or
Nope.
the trophy hunter.
Yep.
See, I was asking you about bees, but like then we got this guy. The bees are just nothing compared to this thing. He's almost like a rancor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah.
That sort of scale.
Yeah.
And not only do we have these Graugs, these massive creatures, but then within each region, each sort of ecosystem and environment within Mordor, they have unique variations on those creatures as well.
Right.
So I think one we had in one of our trailers in Gorgoroth, so in that kind of the flowing
The
lava in
heart
the
of,
volcano.
Mordor.
There's this sort of flame-breathing, lava-spouting
Right.
It
Graugs
seems like
as well.
on top of the enemy designs, there's a lot more diversity in the environments.
Yep.
We're seeing a lot of, like the last game was really cool, but it focused around two major sections. And here we're seeing so much more. How did a lot of those come together?
Just an amazing lot of hard work by every kind of team within Monolith. One of the big strengths we have is having our own engine. It's the
Right.
Firebird engine.
Yeah.
So, at the beginning of the game, we're like, okay, we need the worlds to be bigger, and we need more of them, and they have to be more diverse, and they've got to have better vegetation, and we want them to be more detailed, and everything has to be able to set on fire, and there's massive fortresses in them with hundreds of guys, and we want to vary them all depending on what tribe it is.
Yeah.
And, instead of
if
just
you're-
going, you guys are complete lunatics, pissed off, they actually, they did it.
They listen
It's
to
just
you.
amazing.
So if you're in the icy area of Saragosse, right, and you're approaching the fortress, my fortress might be owned by the Feral tribe, and your fortress might be owned
Yep.
by the Mystic tribe. So that land is going to look completely different
Yes.
between the two of us.
Yes.
So really, instead of having 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 areas, you've got those on top of customization with each tribe. So you just invariable number of different things to see.
Yeah, it's the same approach that we took with the orcs themselves, of having this additional layer of behavior and personality and visuals that are going to let everyone experience their own unique story. I mean,
I really appreciate that because I mean, it was specifically at IGN, we would come in and we'd have conversations around the last game about who we were sort of beefing with.
Yeah.
Like who in the game hated us the most, like
Yep.
what they hated specifically. I had a lot of guys that didn't like bees, so I specifically put bees at many people. Big fan of that.
And that's been blown out too, right? Like the
Yeah.
weaknesses, the strengths, the fears, all of that stuff.
The personality, the identity. We've added rivalries, so there's particular orcs who will be rivals with each other. That'll
That's
come
so
out when
cool.
they meet. Blood brothers, who if will have these kind of connections to each other, and if one of them dies or is promoted, that will affect the other orcs. So there's all just these new types of relationships and stories, and then there's all the dialogue to support all of those stories and remember it. And then there's the fact that the orcs, they don't just get given their personality or their identity when they're created. They can actually evolve and learn as they go through the game. So the trophy hunter might have acquired that title because he'd successfully killed a
Graug,
high-ranking orc. Yeah, or a Graug Slayer.
or
so
a Drake, which
Yep. Oh, wow, here
Evan
we
seems
go.
to be riding right now.
These are a really nice way to cruise around and just get a bit of a sense of the open world. See one of the outposts there as
God,
well.
it's so gorgeous. fortresses.
Yeah, this is really cool. This is giving us a really good idea of what this whole universe here looks like, and it's stunning.
So I think that was one of the big questions of the first game, right? Is or leading from the first game into the second game is you have the fortresses, you have the story missions.
Come on!
What?
Well, now you know why you can't tame them.
Yeah, that's like, imagine that's like if you did that to an Uber driver. That's horrible. He couldn't have just landed it and got off.
He could have. He could have just hopped off.
Where's the fun in that, right?
So we're coming up on a fortress right now. Do you want to explain sort of quickly what this is?
Absolutely. So we can see the fortresses. It's a feral stronghold. We can see the Overlord is the guy at the top. And for each Overlord and War Chief defending the fortress, who's he? The biter. Oh, they've had to actually put a muzzle on this guy.
Because he was biting people?
Yeah, he was biting other orcs. He needed to be muzzled. Not a good trait in an
I like how
Overlord.
you take these like they're almost like mental patients.
Yeah.
And they're very rudimentary and very disgusting. But then they have this highly advanced intellectual system with
Yeah, they're
each
not
other.
stupid
No,
at all.
they just look that way.
Yeah, they're just exaggerated. They're
Yeah.
just certain sort of human psychological traits kind of turned up to 11. So
Yeah.
they're really driven by fear and hate. That's what they're all about.
I really like the way you put it when we spoke at your studio in Kirkland. You were saying that a lot of the influence for some of these orcs came from like iconic supervillains,
Yep.
right? Like Batman has a ton of great supervillains, and they're not crazy mental patients. They're just flawed people that are exaggerated to the nth degree.
Yeah, it's just really pushing a lot of those ideas of fear and hate and competitiveness to this kind of extreme area that makes it into this kind of makes them into these very over-the-top personalities, because it could be a very grim, dark game, but it's really important that it's fun and some of these guys are funny and that you can enjoy running around in here as well.
I think that's what I really appreciate about these games is they are based on a very sort of dark universe, and you have these dark characters, and even the title of the game just evokes something. But then you get in there, and it does get very fun and goofy, and you do have that moment like you kill that dragon, you drop him in the air. I mean, you're also working with, Troy Baker and stuff like that. Like, that's the kind of guy that he's got a sense of humor, you know?
Yeah, the humor and the differences in tone are just so important. So it can be really dark and serious and epic at one moment, and then it can be funny. Oh,
I love these moments.
To defeat this filth. I mourn
Orm the Biter, I love it.
But I relish the opportunity to avenge it. This fortress houses the snarling beasts of Mordor. You will know them by their terrible cries, and your screams of terror will fuel their frenzy.
So these are kind of the introductions that happen every time you approach a fortress.
Yeah.
And I just real quickly, I love the fact that his voice is muzzled because he's wearing the muzzle. That's an awesome attention to detail.
And that's procedural as well, so that can adapt to different voices and things as well. So it's the whole.
He's very angry for a man with like beautiful beachfront property and like palm trees and all that, but he does live in like a sort of a dark, wet, terrifying world.
Yeah, and I think there's a level on which they enjoy the competition and the combat, and their whole kind of society is kind of founded on this very dog-eat-dog power hierarchy.
They don't realize that they're the bad guys, right? They don't, they're just, to them, the elves or the dwarves are the bad guys.
Yeah, or Talion.
Or Talion.
Definitely.
I mean, when you're killing drakes and your friends on the battlefield,
Oh, man. So let's talk about this enemy right here.
So in this case, this is actually an ally. So because we also have our own war leaders that we bring in as part of our army, and each one of those allows us to bring in different upgrades into the assaults and the siege as well. So in this case, the artillery or the drakes that are up above. Oh, there's two drakes. There's one's landed up on top of the tower.
So he called one in and using one of his siege
and there was
powers.
a wild. Oh, this is just going crazy.
The humanity.
This is just pure chaos down here. I love it. There's like dudes on fire. There's drakes. Somebody was throwing those those fart bombs. What's the technical term for those?
Fart bomb.
Yeah.
You nailed it. So that's a piece of the new gear system, right? So that's a legendary piece. You find those for killing war chiefs or captains. What I really love now, though, is these fortress sieges. They have victory conditions. They have victory points. I think Talion's standing in one right now. Do you want to go ahead and explain how these work?
Yeah, absolutely. So in order to capture the fortress, depending on how many war chiefs are defending it, you need to get into these victory points, clear the enemies out, bring your followers in. And Evan actually just revived one of our followers that was bleeding out there as well.
Nicely done, Evan.
And then planting the glaive, planting that spear to claim that point. And then you can actually do them in whatever order that you want. There's kind of the suggested order of A, B, and C, and sticking with your army.
Going towards the heart of it.
Yeah, if you want to leave them on taking the first victory point and you want to head off to the other one, you can do that. But then there's lots of ways you can manipulate or change that up as well. You can have spies who are infiltrated into the fortress. You can have spies who are bodyguards of the war chiefs that are coming out, so they'll try and stab them in the back and sabotage the different defenses.
Now, traversal in general has always been quick, especially in the last game. But have you guys added anything new to the sort of moveset this time around?
Yeah, we've same as with all of that sort of core controls. Yeah, so you can now shadow strike directly to the ground.
That rules.
The other one, I mean, it's not exactly like it's our invention in video games, but we have double jump now using the power of the Wraith, and that just opens up the mobility of the world so much. The environments have a lot more verticality and bigger buildings, and so we had a thing called Elven movement, so as you vault over things, you can get a burst of acceleration.
Speed.
And so you've got that on all the buildings and all the climbing now, so now you can get up incredibly quickly as you're
I did notice that as I played, that scaling buildings, you do step, and then he leaps like Superman 40 feet in the air and grabs onto a
so it's
handhold.
really fast. And as well, we have a resource called Focus, which you can use for your sort of slow-mo aerial bow fighting, which is also now a requirement of every single video game ever, apparently. But
it's got to be.
Exactly. But that focus, you can click the left stick to sprint and use your focus.
I love that we're having a conversation about focus.
Yeah,
wow. One of the most chaotic video game battles I've ever seen is happening. And this is like, this is not something that's going to happen in everybody's game.
No,
in varying different degrees.
No, we're never going to see the same thing again.
This sandbox that we just created right here is ours to share and destroy.
Yeah.
I love it.
I just love, it's so excellent to see so many different moving pieces coming together.
Yeah.
Right? Like the, I think in one of the, he just got hit. That is not a good place to be. So he's down and gets a quick time event to get one more chance at
life. You get a last chance. If you actually look down to the bottom left of the mini-map, you can see the number of last chances that you have left. So it's really a resource that you can use in combat. So this has been a bit of a bloodbath here at this particular one. Some of the followers bleeding out. And there's another bit of... Oh,
man.
There's a Drake down there, too, now.
This just looks so damn fun. Like, that is just the word I can't stop thinking about watching this stuff.
Yeah, it's just that, like, anything can happen at any time.
Yeah.
So the Nemesis system can surprise you. The wildlife can surprise you. The combat ops and the fire, it's... Oh, no.
It's incredibly chaotic, but you feel like you have a good sense of control of it if you know what you're doing.
That is an enormous amount of work. That's everything, you know, the camera team, the AI team in terms of how things are spaced out, the combat team, I think even things like adding the glaive, so the spear to clear space, the UI team, of course, to get enough information that you need but not overwhelm you. It's just...
And then you've got a bunch of orcs and friends that are going to walk out of this battle either disappointed or sad or remembering.
They're all going to remember something from this. If they survive, if they die. Actually, I think one of the most fun things that can happen is if you do lose at this point.
Yeah.
It's not like you just replay the same thing again. Its time's going to move forward until you resurrect. Your followers that were there. Sorry.
So when look at this guy, he's got boils. Oh man, I don't even want to touch him.
Yeah, you don't want him on your army.
So when can people start to create their own personal stories in Shadow of War?
It's coming out on October 10th. So
soon?
Not too long, but we actually moved back to that date and we just got a little bit of extra time and it's just been fantastic because we're really just getting to polish and optimize and just clear it out.
I can't wait to get in there.
It's great.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming by. Your game looks incredibly fun, completely insane, and also very gross, which I love.
Thank you.
The biggest video game event of the year is here, and IGN has it all. Hit it! World premiere trailers and breaking news as it happens.
The floor is actually shaking.
Every game, every event. IGN at E3, June 10th through 15th.